Hey, what's going on, guys? This is the Superior Covenant Podcast. If you're tuning in for the first time, welcome. We've got a pretty good episode coming up for you here today. And I noticed when I was editing it that we do reference a last time, because basically we did an episode before this one, but the audio didn't really turn out, so we might be showing clips of that later on in a different episode or something, but we don't really know exactly what's going to happen with that yet. Anyways, got a lot of good stuff coming up for you. This episode right here is pretty meaty, so hopefully you enjoy it. We are expecting to start expanding this a little bit more, putting it on different platforms and everything, but we're still trying to decide what exactly we're going to do with this whole thing, and just wherever the Lord wants to take it. Anyway, hope you guys enjoy this episode. If you have any questions, we're actually setting up an email right now so you guys can mail in your questions to us, and maybe it'll get answered on the show. Anyways, enjoy.
There it is. That's the
Ricky,
Caleb.
Dylan, and we've got some special guests today. Introduce yourself, fellas.
I'm Sonny.
I'm Matthew.
This is the first time she goes to the microphone.
So last week we kind of mentioned a little bit just like the use of apologetics, and Caleb and Aaron had mentioned them doing some like apologetics classes, and that's one of my favorite topics is apologetics, just because it's interesting. And for anybody that doesn't know, apologetics is basically just like the defense of the faith. So it could go anything from just like logical fallacies to why we have feelings and things like that, to like the creation of the world, or just like the defense of biblical beliefs. But I wanted to kind of talk about, so that's the defense of the faith, but I want to talk about like who we need to target when we are like learning about apologetics, and like who we need to gear our message toward. So I just wanted to go over, or just read Matthew 28:19 real quick. Does anybody know that one off the top of their head? You'll know it when you hear it. Matthew should have every scripture from Matthew memorized, but he doesn't.
Didn't know words.
So just a second here.
This is why you have things bookmarked.
Yeah, but I didn't. So, Matthew 28:19 says, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I am with you, always to the very end of the age." So my first question is just, what is the biggest obstacle when it comes to like living this call for you guys?
Should I go first? It's Caleb.
Yeah.
Biggest obstacle as being like living the faith is that it's not popular. Definitely not.
Yeah.
It's not like a popular thing to do. Even though like in today's age, to be different is kind of popular now. Like I guess you get hipsters or like anybody like that. To be like different than like everybody else is to be popular. So you think like, oh, Christianity would be popular because it's different and no one does it. But no. I mean, like being like a Christian and like saying like, hey, I believe in God, that's popular. Like everybody does that.
Yeah.
But actually having a faith with Jesus Christ and like having this relationship and like actually pursuing it wholeheartedly, that's definitely not popular.
Mm-hmm.
Like saying like stuff that you're doing is bad, or like doing anything like that it's not popular at all. So that's a big obstacle for me, at least, because I do care, even though like I might say not sometimes, I do care what people think of me. I do care like a lot, like more than I should, and like that shouldn't be like a big. I was like doing like a Bible study this morning, and it was like this. It was in Galatians, and they were talking about the Galatians were doing stuff like the Jews because they wanted to fit in, and they were doing that because they were seeking the attention like of fitting in. They wanted to be liked by everybody, and it was kind of like a false idol to them. Like false idols, we always think of like our Xbox or pornography or stuff like that, but it can be an idea in itself or like a thought. And just being popular in a way, not like super popular, like cool kids, but like just being liked by everybody or loved by everybody pursues that. And being a Christian and actually following the faith and have a relationship with God, God says people are not going to like you. That's like literally, people are not going to like you, and for reasons that you don't even know. And so that's a big obstacle for me, is that like I hate when people don't like me, and I like try as hard as I can to like get them to like me. And so like having that obstacle in my way is pretty big, but I always have to like just get over it and just be like, yeah, people are just going to hate me for no reason.
And that kind of answers the question. What I'm more kind of going for is like, what are the obstacles when it comes to like living out this specific verse as far as like going and making disciples? Because that, could be your answer. Is just like the fear of not being liked. But do you have anything to add to that, Dylan?
So your question is, what's the biggest obstacle in basically missionary work, like furthering out disciples within the church, or like?
Not necessarily missionary work. I mean, God says that we can serve Him in any capacity, and we kind of talked about that last week too.
That's what I mean when I say like missionary work, is just basically within that. But so that's kind of just what your question is. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you don't need to be a missionary to lead somebody.
No, exactly.
You could do that on the sidewalk because you met somebody.
Yeah. A lot of times I think it's more of like something that is just more, the obstacle is more of yourself, just kind of getting to that point where you're saying like, not only am I going to stand up for my faith, but I'm willing to go out and do God's work. Because I think that a lot of people kind of get stuck like in that spot where it's like, I'm comfortable with where I'm at. I don't need to do anything else, and your faith becomes really stagnant. So then there's no room to grow. There's no room to grow the church or share that with really any other people, because if you're not growing yourself, then you don't have like a hunger or a desire to share that with anybody else. Or you can run into the people who are, really knowledgeable about the church, but when it comes down to it, they don't have a great relationship with God or anything like that. They just know kind of what to say to lead other people. And I think that, so in a way, like, basically the biggest obstacle to Christians is just other Christians, or to like kind of making disciples and stuff, is just kind of growing too comfortable instead of like, seeking out to fulfill God's work that He has for us.
Yeah. You guys have anything else?
Well, I agree a lot with what Dylan said. I mean, at least me personally, it's like a difficult thing for me to walk up to somebody and be like, hey, you know what, let me share something with you. Like, I think that's probably the biggest obstacle for people, like, to get over, is like
kind of discomfort.
Exactly, it's getting out of your comfort zone. And the unfortunate thing with God is He usually calls you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Well, you're always kind of afraid. Like, whenever I was like evangelizing or anything, when I went to Bible college, it was like I was afraid that they're gonna have like this outrageous like reaction to what I'm saying. They're gonna be like a hardcore atheist, or like they're gonna spit in my face, or like punch me for like some weird reason. But like anybody I've ever had a conversation with like that has been either super open or just said, hey, I don't want to talk about that, and just walked away. It wasn't like that hard of a deal to go down. But even like now, like I still, even though I've had those conversations with people, I still have those over drastic fears about that. Like it's something that you just have to like do. And I feel like it's something like even like the devil will get in your head and say like, nah, they're gonna be like this, because it's like an outrageous reaction to it. But like that's something that can be a different obstacle, and that is just reactions of people coming back at it, and to be prepared in it too. Like how we're talking about having apologetics in it, like you don't want to go up there and then like you present them this question and they come back with a better one, and you're like, oh shoot. I don't like, you don't not know the answer, and then like you just not representing God right. But And that's also like can be a big obstacle too.
Well, I think like another thing that I would like to throw in there is like, you know, a lot of times we're kind of taught to go out and talk to people about certain things, but even just walking up to somebody and being friendly and loving to them, and like, you know, that is ministry, and that's like doing the work of God right there. Like, that's showing the love of Christ and putting that into their life. Like, you know, and establishing relationships with people is like the easiest way to do any kind of ministry at all. Like, is to just connect with that person one-on-one by showing them the love of Christ just in your everyday life too. Is like, and I've seen that work for me. Is like my friends who aren't you know, Christian at all, or they don't really want to have anything to do with that, but they, you know that I am, or they can kind of see that, you know, it's different, the way that like I live my life and stuff. And even that, just like, even if it takes time, you know, and we just have to be patient with it, like that opens up lots of opportunities too. So I think it is important to like obviously go out and talk about this stuff without being afraid, but even just to, you know, create relationships with people as well is just as important as that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I might reference this verse like every time we get together, but the where it says in Matthew to go and be salt and light, and that's like what you're talking about right now, and that's kind of how I like to live out this verse, is just to be salt and light. But in that same way, it kind of like puts a lot of pressure on yourself to just be living that lifestyle 100%. And for me, I always feel like if I just slip up one time in front of that person that I maybe trying to like minister to, or just trying to like live as an example too, I feel like if I mess up, then that's like taking 2 steps back, and it's just gonna take forever to kind of regain their trust in that way, even though they themselves aren't perfect. But I think a lot of it, when it comes to just like going and making disciples, it's just like knowing how, and kind of knowing where that person's coming from is really tough. Like Caleb was saying, like you can't really read them. You know, you don't know how they're gonna respond, and you know, it's just scary. You don't want them to like not like you, because if you come off too strong the first time, then it might be like the only chance that they give you to kind of share that gospel with them.
You can't go up to somebody and be like, "You're going to hell." Like, that never works. Like,
Yeah.
Like, you know, and like we always get nervous, or like, because that's the whole point of it. That's the whole point of sharing the gospel or making disciples, because the way we're trying to love on them, we're trying to save them. That's the disciple message, is that you want to do that so they don't go to hell. But you can't just go up to somebody and be like, "You're going to hell." And I'm like, "But I was too before I had Jesus." And like, you can't go up, like, because I've had like friends or like family members even that have come to my church, and people have gone up to them and said like, "Do you have Jesus Christ in your heart?" "No." "Oh, then you're going to hell." And
That's just
like,
the worst approach.
That's a
Yeah,
horrible
like,
approach. A
like,
horrible
you can't
approach.
expect a
If
good
you walk up
reaction
to,
from
like,
that.
and it doesn't matter what you think. It's not even our place to just be like, "Hey, sorry, you're going to hell." Like,
Yeah.
like, that's a horrible approach. And it's always bugged me, like, growing up, like, going through different churches and stuff like that, like, you see that approach used so often.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
it sucks. It's like,
Yeah.
why would I be like, I like these people. They have a really
What's your right?
Yeah, like, they have a lot of good stuff going for them. Like, I don't know. Yeah, it's always been rough.
Yeah, it never works. And yeah, I like the salt and be the salt and light to them, is because I've always had it that being like doing your own actions and acting out a relationship with Christ is the best evangelical tool to like share with people. Like, I've been in New York on like a missions trip, and I wasn't even doing any missionary work at the time. I was literally going to Starbucks to get coffee, and I held the door open for 2 people, and they looked at me like I was weird. Like, I guess nobody holds door opens for people in New York. And I held the door open for them, and they like looked at me like, "What? Why would you do that?" And they're like, "Oh, you having a good day today, man?" And I was like, I mean, kinda. He's like, why are you such in a good mood? I'm like, what do you mean? You have the door open for us.
The door open.
He was like, oh, I was just trying to be nice, man. He's like, oh, man, I've never seen anybody do that. And I was like, what?
Ain't got this California hospitality over there.
Yes. I was just being nice, man. Just like they would see something different about me, even though it was like I was only holding the door open for them. And it wasn't even like any cute girls. It was just some two dudes.
Dudes need the Lord too, Caleb.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I want to get at is, like, when it comes to going out and making disciples, is like, how are we doing it wrong? And what do we and what do, like, the listeners need to know in order to be able to live out that call? So I wanted to kind of talk about, like, what is the biggest hindrance in our way as far as, like, belief systems go? You know, is it the atheists kind of spreading their belief that is slowing us down the most as far as trying to get make disciples, or is it, you know, the bad Christians, the lukewarm Christians? Is it, you know, another belief system? Is it like cults that are just confusing people, or kind of what belief systems are hindering people the most from coming to Jesus?
Bad Christians. That's like a huge one. I mean, you could take any atheist or anybody like Scientologist, any other thing, but the thing that hinders people the most for coming and having a relationship with Christ is bad Christians, because they get in their mind that they can be saved, so they can have like the Lord, and like say like, hey, I believe in Christ, and be good. Like they don't do anything else. They don't even go to church. They don't do anything. They live their own life of just sin, doing nothing, and all they have in their heart is that they said, yeah, I believe in God, but that's not the whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's what some churches actually teach. If they just say you're all good, it's just like the good field churches is that everything's fine. Like, you know, you're good. Jesus is love.
Saved,
God
saved,
is
you don't have to do anything.
God is love. Like, you know, like everything's the best, and like nothing's wrong with it.
Yeah.
So like that, I feel like one of the biggest hindrances, like when I try to talk to people that say that they're Christians, it's like, oh no, I'm fine, because no, I believe in God, yeah, and they'll agree with everything I'm trying to say to them, but they won't change any aspect of their life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what that causes too for non-believers is they see that, and then they look at our whole religion as hypocrites.
Yeah.
So it automatically is like a huge turn off for them.
Yeah.
In that way.
Yeah, that's something that I've been dealing with at work lately. There's a girl that you guys might know that just talks about how much of a Christian she is. And she probably goes to work. She probably goes to church like at least 3 times a week, and she's always talking about her faith and things like that. And just the other day, there was a girl that said, like, she doesn't like this girl that goes to church all the time, because this girl that goes to church all the time, the, you know, so-called Christian, is always gossiping so much and is always so mean to people. Like the girl that's like a non-Christian specifically said, like, she always says she's a Christian, but our Christian's supposed to be like nice, and she's so rude, you know. But if you were to approach this girl and talk to her about it, like kind of confront her, and kind of like on just a discipleship level, and like as an accountability partner type of level, she would just deny it. And it's kind of like, how do we deal with that situation? You know?
I think the bummer part about that though too is like, you know, kind of towards your question of what's hindering that the most is like, I think that, you know, although I do believe that Christians should be held at a somewhat higher standard, that a lot of times non-believers will put us on a pedestal instead of saying like, oh, they're human too, and they're going to make the exact same mistakes I am. They're just putting their faith and trust in Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of it too is just the fact that there's not enough knowledge about what we actually believe towards non-Christians or non-believers of anything, that it's just kind of like, okay, well, instead of just saying you're a person and you make mistakes, but I like the fact that you have a person named Jesus who's going to help you out. Like, instead of that, it's just kind of like, well, you have to be perfect because you're a Christian. And I think that just puts like so much pressure like on us as Christians, like to always act as perfect as we possibly can. And as much as like we should be, good disciples to everyone around us and acting the best way we can, it's like so difficult to just say, oh yeah, I'm going to be absolutely perfect, make no mistakes, and have this person follow Christ, and then when they don't, like, we just beat ourselves up about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like I was thinking about, like, if I were to, try to kind of turn somebody towards Christianity in kind of this like apologetics sort of a way, like what kind of person would be the hardest to get to believe in Christianity in just that sort of kind of logical way or emotional way, whatever you need to do. Would it be like an atheist or like maybe a Buddhist or a Muslim or something like that? And I would think a lot of people, like, I used to be afraid of like sharing my faith with an atheist because I would always be afraid of like, what if they make some really good points?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what Caleb was saying, was like, what if you don't know how to answer their question? And I think that's always the fear of like, what if I come across this like really smart atheist? But I think that just gets blown up too much. Like if we were to like go to YouTube and look at apologetics videos and just leave it open, then it would come up with some sciencey type thing with an atheist. It wouldn't be, a Christian and a Buddhist or a Christian and a Hindu or anything like that. It would be a Christian and an atheist. Maybe, 1 in 100 videos is like a Muslim and an atheist, but it's always against this atheist. And what we need to realize is that throughout history, atheists have only made up no more than 3% of the population, which is really interesting. Since the beginning of time, basically, since the beginning of records, it's always been, atheists have always only made up 1 to 3% of the population. Because, if we, and I'm just going to define atheist as a person that will say there is no God, and then an agnostic would be somebody that says, like, I'm not sure if there's a God or not. So, if we think about it, like, how many people do we know that are going to say with confidence there is no God?
Yeah.
And that's not going to be very many people. I personally, can only think of one that's going to say there is no God and is going to argue that point. So, I was doing some research and I found some stats on from the Pew Research Center, and it says that it gives percentages of different religions, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, and stuff like that, and it has atheists, at 3.1%, but that number really isn't even that high, because on here there's one category with the atheists that says, like, how do you believe in God? Like, are you confident there is no God? Or are you, like, within, are you a little bit confident that there is no God, or something like this? And the category that's, I'm, like, completely confident that there's no God is only, like, 80%. So I would say
3%.
Of that 3%.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
say
I was like,
Yeah, I was like, hold on a second.
Oh, you got
I would say I personally would consider that other 20% of that 3% not atheists, because they're still kind of fumbling with the idea of if there's a God or not. But it was really interesting to see just the demographics. This is the Pew Research Center, and it breaks it down into a bunch of different categories. And looking at it, the breakdown of age group is like almost all young people, 18 to 29, and then it just goes down completely. And I think because if you're an atheist, once you like start to have a family and you get married, then you're going to have that love in your heart, and you're going to realize, like, this isn't just like biology in my heart that's causing me to feel this way about my kids.
It's easier to kind of understand.
Yeah, and they're gonna want to kind of instill these, unintentionally instill these like biblical principles in their kids, and they're just going to be like, where is this coming from? So I think that's why we see this like downward slope of people as they get older. So of that, you know, only 9% of atheists are like elderly people, because by the time they get that old, they have just decided that that's not the way to go. And then the other statistic, or one of the other statistics that was really interesting, is they're like more than 2/3 male, and I think it's because males are typically more just arrogant. Which can we agree with that?
Yeah, I agree
It's
with
more
that.
stubborn. And it's like a woman is typically a little bit more reasonable when it comes to that sort of a thing. So I think that's why, you know, we see that big trend there. And then I really like, you can there's one category. Let's see what it words it completely.
Real quick, before you move on, do you think that's more of like a society thing, just like among the world, like how men are like put up to a different standard, like versus women, like among the world, just because of the fact of that? Like, I would think that would play a lot into it too, of just that stubbornness building up in their hearts.
Yeah.
And does it say anything like about like where, like area wise in the world, or is it just a world population?
This is for the United States, I believe.
Oh, okay.
And that brings me to another point, is it does seem like Christianity is becoming unpopular in the United States. And to an extent that's true, but it's also just growing in other areas of the United States, but it's also just growing rapidly throughout Africa, where there used to be absolutely no Christians. Now it's a large majority of the entire continent of Africa is Christians, and same with Asia. In China, where it's illegal to be a Christian, there are still a lot of Christians through China, and experts predict that, you know, within a few years it could be, you know, a large majority or a large percentage of the population of China could be, you know, Christian. But there's this other category that says frequency of feeling spiritual peace and well-being among atheists. And for this category, it has like 45% of them say they never feel spiritual peace and well-being, which I would say is really
horrible.
sad.
Yeah.
Like for me, the highest option is at least once a week, and I would say I'd fall into that category for sure. Like just feeling spiritual peace and well-being, and I don't think you need to believe in God to feel spiritual peace. That's just to like be happy and kind of content with life, is what I would say. And it allows you to compare this to other religious groups. And if we compare it to like other religious groups, then the atheists are by far the lowest on that category, which I just thought was amazing.
I think that's because atheists are depending on worldly things to feel happy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
eventually worldly things go away no matter what they are.
So my point there is just that I don't think we need to kind of target our studies so much towards atheists as just these lukewarm Christians that go around saying they're Christians, when the definition of Christian is to be Christ-like, and they're not fitting into that category very well.
Yeah, and I think, you know, our pastor talks about that a lot. Actually, it's just kind of like, you know, throughout, you know, his life and everything, he's met people that have claimed to be Christian, but really were not good examples of Christ. And so, you know, I agree with him in the same way, and pretty much agree with what you just said there as well. Like, if somebody claims to be a Christian and they're not acting like Christ in some way, it bugs me. Like in high school, like especially like in high school youth groups and stuff, like you would meet kids that would be like, yeah, I come here because it's something fun to do or something like that. But then like Saturday night before church, they're at like a party getting stoned and drunk and all that stuff. And it's like, I don't know. It really bugged me in high school. And I know that like, you know, a lot of our youth are, you know, not doing that necessarily, but it kind of scares me. Like, you know, what if our youth are just there just because, you know? And I would hope that like we'd be able to instill in them, you know, something better, that they wouldn't want to do that, or if they have been, that they would turn away from that. You know, but I just remember like always having an issue with that, just kind of like, well, you're not representing what I represent. And so when somebody else hears like, oh, Dylan's a Christian, but then, oh, this person over here is claiming to be a Christian and they do horrible stuff, how can, like, you can't, there's not a clear representation of what that is. And so I think that muffles up a lot of what non-believers think about us too.
Yeah. Well, and like I would say people are, for the youth, you know, we do junior high and high school youth group. For those kids, seeing us like in the way we act, if we don't act in a Christ-like way, then we're just setting a precedent for them. And what they're seeing like in their schools is like, okay, this is how Christians act, this is okay. You know, when in reality that's not how Christians act at all.
And especially because like we're younger people, so we're not that far off from where they were, you know. It's like, so our personalities aren't that different from where theirs were at necessarily. Like, you know, we're obviously more mature, but like, you know, the way that we may act within a group of people is still going to be pretty similar to how we acted in high school. And unless that was dramatically different than what most people do, you just kind of fit into the group of the world. Like, and so it's really hard, I think, you know, you know, obviously if they didn't like to go, they wouldn't go. You know, your parents can make you go, I guess, but I don't think that they would eventually stop coming if they didn't want to. But I just hope that, like, you know, if any of you kids are listening, that you know, I just hope that they know that like that you can come to like their pastor and stuff like that, and because there's always been a separation and there shouldn't be, like, I don't know.
You know, it's like, it's definitely like, for me to become like actually following the Lord, it was because of examples that are in my life, and my youth pastor actually coming into my life and like pouring into me. Like he actually grabbed me and Aaron, and every Thursday after school we would do a Bible study. Like, we had to go to it. Like, our parents would make us, but we ended up loving it. And it wasn't like we just hung out or just talked all the time. It was literally him at his desk, and we brought our Bibles and we did a Bible study. We talked about God. We went through Romans, and that time, I still remember that time. Now I was like a sophomore in high school, and it was like that was good times. Like, I learned a lot from that, and like a lot of like the questions I had in my own head were explained to me. But like as youth and like as youth leaders, or like as older kids that believe in Christ, we have to set that example, and also have that open field to us that kids can come to us and ask us questions about Christianity and about faith. Like, have junior high group every Wednesday night, and like, not like every time, but a lot of the times they'll come up after group and like ask me questions. Not even like about the lessons most of the time. It's about stuff that's going on in their own life, and saying like, hey, I was talking about Christ the other day at school, and these kids came up to me and said that was stupid, and like, what do I do? And like, or like, I have this problem at home, and like, what do I do? Like, that stuff, I'm like so happy to be able to be there for them for that, and like have the answers for that. So yeah, it's also for like any people that are our age listening to this, step up your game. For sure, because like, kids need that, especially in our town, Red Bluff. Like, kids are a lot of the crime. Honestly, a lot of high schoolers, a lot of the crime that happened in our town is because of high schoolers or like kids, and so they need good examples to look at, because that's like big. You might not think that's big, and you might not like, hey, don't look at me, I mess up all the time, but be honest with them. Be like, hey, no, yeah, I do mess up all the time, but I'm trying to do better, and I'm not trying to be stupid.
I would say, even though like our Bibles were written 2,000 plus years ago, they're still 100% relevant today. And the other day in our junior high youth group, Dylan and I have been teaching about the different Jesus' different parables and how most of those are kind of directed towards the religious leaders, the Pharisees, and like, why does Jesus spend so much time teaching about the Pharisees when Jesus himself knew that there would be no Pharisees shortly after his death, because after the temple was destroyed, the Sanhedrin, which was like the religious like high court, like the best of the best, just fell apart, and Jesus prophesied that the temple would fall apart, and he knew all that was going to happen. So why is half of our New Testament about their mistakes? It's because those mistakes are still being made today with the people that are just religious with their nose pointed up, thinking that they're better than everybody else because they have Jesus or something like that. And I think just the amount that we see Jesus talking about that shows us just how important that is even today. And if we look at verses about atheists, like what does the Bible say about atheists? There's really only one verse, and that's Psalm 14:1. Flip over there real quick.
Again, kids.
I was flipped over to a different verse. Like, my bad.
Today's episode is brought to you by bookmarks.
They're handy.
The greatest invention.
So Psalm 14:1 says, "The fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. Their deeds are vile. There is no one who does good." So basically, the Bible says, if you don't believe there's a God, then you're a fool. And that's the extent of what it says about that. But then I wanted to go over to 1 Timothy chapter 4, which is what I'm going to be teaching on in my Sunday school on Sunday. But it says, "The Spirit clearly says that in later times some will abandon the faith and follow deceiving spirits and things taught by demons. Such teachings come through hypocritical liars whose consciences have been seared as with a hot iron." I would just say this verse speaks so much to like this time right now, even though it says the Spirit clearly says that in later times, and we don't know what those later times are. But I think Paul, the author of this, just means like it's going to be happening from now until forever. Final thoughts.
I guess final thoughts for like ministry wise and like why kids nowadays like to like follow Christ is like the whole popular thing is like in high school for sure it's hard to go like talk about Christ. I remember being in high school and like we had a club for it. That was cool, but like nobody like there wasn't like I don't remember there being like any hardcore followers there, and like the teacher that was there was cool, but I don't remember anybody like seeing them outside of that club or whatever, them being like.
I feel like most people went for like pizza. And
Literally there was free pizza and they went. So like,
yeah.
I was thinking about having some pizza today for us, and then I was like, it's 4:30.
Perfect time.
Literally dinner time. Ricky, I was hungry.
But anyways, if I wanted to come away from like this kind of topic with anything, it's just that kind of from the statistic that I shared, it's like everybody has thoughts about like if there's a higher power or not, whether they're an atheist or not. They can say that they are all they want. There's another category in there that's how often do you contemplate like the world and that sort of thing, and that was the highest category, or like the most often category, like once a week or something like that, was the most common for every religious group, because that's something that people talk about. And even if like they can turn themselves off to that as much as they want, but they're still going to think about it, and it's still going to be rattling around in the back of their head. And it's like how we see the number of atheists steadily decline as they get older. It's because like those thoughts are just rattling around in the back of their head for so long that eventually they just give it some thought. So I want that to be like an encouragement, just to not be afraid and to not give up.
Well, like another like defense you can have is that most scientists nowadays They believe in creation.
Oh yeah, that was another thing. Is it also breaks it down into education level.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
high
I was gonna
school,
ask about
some college degree, or like postgraduate, as in like master's or doctorate. And I would think that a common misconception would be that like postgraduate degree would be like no Christians there, but no, like that's one of the, for Christians at the postgraduate level, like that's the highest category right there. Like the atheists at a postgraduate level was probably the smallest one there.
Well, yeah, going through science, like most scientists nowadays, they totally believe in creation. Like that we weren't just started. Like that, all this just didn't happen in a way like that. We didn't like come from like molecules and then form into a human being, and then got this cool mind that we can like create and design stuff. And there's art.
This cool mind.
And like all of that just happening like that. Like no, most scientists now believe that they're created, but they don't say God. It's like, oh, it's like aliens, which sounds like all right. So you want to believe in aliens rather than God? Like I guess like you can.
Because they don't want to be accountable to God.
Yeah, they don't want to be accountable to God. Exactly.
I'd way rather be accountable to some aliens.
Yeah. I mean, aliens have lasers.
That's so scary. Like,
Yeah.
they're like, I pledge my allegiance to aliens. Like, oh no.
People are crazy.
It's like, what if they come back? What's going on? God's coming back. What like, yeah, like you can. I don't remember any of the names. There's the guy that is in a wheelchair, and
Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking. He literally, in his book, in his recent book, he literally claims that he believes that we were created by an extraterrestrial beings, like that. We were started like that.
Yeah.
Because.
Do you remember what the name of the book was at all?
No.
Okay.
It has his name on it, really big.
Stephen Hawking.
Yeah. Well, there's a movie about Stephen Hawking now, and at the end of the
Great
movie,
movie.
at the end of the movie, it kind of hints towards that.
Yeah. Because like
I think too, just like one thing about being like sharing Christ with people is kind of being a witness, or kind of giving a testimony just about your experience with God, and just how he touched your heart, how you were saved, and how he made you a new creature. And I believe that his blood makes me righteous. It's what kind of closes the gap between me and God. And I share that with people too, and just kind of be honest. And
For sure.
if that person kind of already has an openness to God, and their heart's already kind of ready to receive, sometimes you kind of just know too. So like you'll see the openness in them, and that's how you know you can kind of just like get in there a little deeper.
Yeah, for sure. What I said.
And he finishes it with a bang.
Big bang.
Okay, bye.